The Aorus 16X is the gaming laptop of the future. Or at least Gigabyte would hope that you'd think so. Aorus has gone all in on AI, with these machines literally being called Aorus AI gaming laptops as part of their redefined scheme. Just as a side note, all of these like buzzword / deliberate misspelling sort of tags just annoy me. I don't know about you, but anyway, despite such a hefty marketing presence, the actual AI features that Gigabyte offers here are really pretty minimal. It's just 3 items in the Gigabyte Control Center app as part of the AI Nexus section. Actually, if I'm gonna be blunt, the only thing remotely close to AI is the Stable Diffusion GUI that's an optional extra download. The other 2 AI things are basically just 2 versions of the standard laptop performance modes. One for GPU management and one for like power limits, basically, and fan curves. These existing modes now have AI options which just switch between modes based on what programs are open. Yeah, that's not AI, that's bog standard programming. It's also pretty likely that they just maintain a whitelist of apps to trigger a change in mode and maybe monitor things like GPU usage and webcam usage to know if it should put you in gaming mode or, meeting mode. Like, it's really pretty basic. As for the AI generator tab, well, that's really pretty funny. The only module currently available is Invoke AI's Stable Diffusion GUI. You just download the module, download the Stable Diffusion model, the only one you have access to, and then you get access to what is a very limited version of the standard Stable Diffusion GUIs that are already freely available. Just for fun, I made it create an image of an Asus gaming laptop, and I'm 98% sure that it's actually an Acer Nitro 5, but it's stuck an Asus logo on it, which is really, really funny to me. In theory, Gigabyte will be partnering with other suppliers to provide you with other tools here, although if the Stable Diffusion one is anything to go by, this isn't really a useful addition. I don't see a way to easily find or swap models, or have the hundreds of extra controls that something like Automatic 1111's tool provides. I guess just to have like a quick play once, this is okay, but if you're even remotely interested in image or text generation or text-to-speech or anything like that, you will want to use the incredibly popular and increasingly easy to set up tools instead. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure that this is actually much of a value add. Part of that does come from the specs too. This has an i9-14900HX with 32 gigs of DDR5 5600 RAM, an RTX 4070 laptop GPU with just 8 GB of VRAM, and 2 1TB SSDs. While that spec is pretty decent for gaming, as we'll soon see, for AI tools, 8 GB of VRAM isn't all that much. For image generation, it's normally fine, at least for smaller image sizes and sort of lower detail, stuff like that, but for text generation, that's very much on the low end. Happily, for gaming, you do get a pretty decent experience. At the native 1600p resolution, you get an average of 152 FPS, at least on the games that I test and at the settings I test at. Esports titles hit in the range of 200 to 300 FPS, and more intensive games are more like 100 FPS or so. For the sake of some comparison, at 1080p you'll find intermittent performance kind of as usual. CS2 has the 16X at the top, above the 13980HX and 4080 of the Scar 16, whereas Cyberpunk, well, that's a bit more of an L with 113 FPS average compared to up to 131 FPS from other machines. Flight Simulator has it in the middle at 99 FPS average, which is down from the 121.5 FPS on the XMG Pro 15, but is higher than, say, the XMG Core 16. Fortnite is basically the same with the 16X in the middle, above the Helios 16 and not too far behind the Scar 16. Hitman's built-in benchmark lets me split out the CPU and GPU performance, and looking at just the GPU data, you can see that the 4070 can actually stretch its legs a little bit here, basically tied with the XMG Pro 15 with a very similar spec. Siege has it in the middle too, again tied with the Scar 16, albeit with a lower minimum. That's not too big a deal though, as the minimum can just be a single hitch rather than throughout the whole run. As for Shadow of the Tomb Raider, that has the 16X up near the top, only behind the XMG Pro 15 and Scar 16 at 170 FPS average. Not bad. Finally, in Starfield, the 16X is actually up at the top, albeit with a lower 1% low result, which is actually a little bit more significant. Happily though, that seems to be more to do with playing at 1080p, as when I ran my tests at 1600p, all of that hitching went away. As for more creative tasks, Cinebench has the 14900HX a touch faster than the 13900HX, but not all by much. Slightly faster single-core performance, and a bit more of a substantial lead in multi-threading. Blender isn't quite as fast, with the 3900HX in the XMG Pro 15 and Focus 16 actually coming out ahead of the 14900HX here. Clearly there isn't much between these two generations, although I think it's safe to say we already knew that from the desktop chips. It's also about the same in power usage too, with this chip sucking back around 120 watts during Blender testing. That's around the same as the XMG Pro 15, although Aorus's cooling solution seems to be doing a better job, keeping the chip at just 82 degrees Celsius at peak. That's actually really impressive for a laptop. As for the display, well, that's a fairly standard 1600p 165Hz IPS panel. To the eye, it looks pretty nice. Colors pop pretty well, and it's obviously plenty sharp. To the Spider X2, well, it's still pretty decent. 79% coverage of the DCI-P3 spectrum is fine if not amazing these days, and a color accuracy delta E of 1.73 isn't too bad either. It isn't quite production ready out of the box, but it's decent enough and takes the calibration well. Gigabyte quotes this as a 400 nit display, but my unit pushed well past that up to 560 nits at peak, with around a 1400:1 contrast ratio. That's great for an IPS panel, although you won't find those deep blacks here, as black is more grey, as it is with all IPS panels. The more gaming related metrics require the use of my very own open source response time tool, available at osrtt.com by the way, if you're interested, and we see an average response time of 5.5 milliseconds. That's slower than the 3 milliseconds Gigabyte quotes, but with 77% of the transitions falling within the refresh rate window, that isn't too bad. In fact, looking at high-speed footage shows that there is functionally no ghosting here. Although new frames do take the whole frame to finish drawing, which isn't perfect, but I mean, still, for an IPS panel, this is perfectly serviceable and actually pretty smooth to the eye. As for latency, that's about right too, about 4 milliseconds on average. That makes for a pretty decent gaming experience. I played quite a few games on this, and even fast-paced FPS games like Siege were a great time. While the display could perhaps be a slightly higher refresh rate, maybe more like 240Hz, and I still don't quite understand why we're putting 1600p displays on machines that really can't run at sometimes even medium settings at 1600p, it's still a pretty good time. It's smooth enough, plenty responsive, and a, well, pretty good time for gaming. The keyboard actually kind of lets it down a little. The transparent keys in illegible font really don't help anything, but I found that the keyboard wouldn't register key presses fairly regularly. Like, fairly deep presses, and they just didn't register. Now, bottoming out the keys does sort it, but I mean, it's not like I'm light-footing it. Happily, the trackpad is spot on. It's pretty large, feels good to use, and has great palm rejection. I/O-wise, you only get 2 USB-A ports, although you do get 2 USB-C ports, a microSD card slot, a combo audio jack, HDMI, Ethernet of all things, and DC in. That isn't exactly packing, but it's not too bad. Inside, you'll find a pretty beefy cooling solution that actually isn't all that loud, as well as two DDR5 SODIMM slots, two M.2 slots, which in my case came with solid-state drive brand SSDs. I mean, I'm joking, these are Gigabyte's own drives, but it's pretty funny that these are the most generic-looking drives you can imagine. They are Gen 4x4, although they aren't exactly top-end performance. They're also not in RAID 0, which is kind of a surprise. I don't think I mind that, but I know ASUS does RAID 0 on their dual drive machines. Maybe you can let me know what you think Gigabyte should do here in the comments. But anyway, you do also get a 99 watt-hour battery, which with the right usage can give you pretty decent runtimes. But, of course, when gaming, this thing drains it like a champion. On the whole, the 16X is a pretty decent machine. The AI stuff really isn't worth considering, as the vast majority of it isn't even tangentially related to AI, it's just a marketing label stuck on top of existing features to trick you into thinking that it's new and fancy. In fact, this machine seems to have an annoying Optimus bug that I've not seen on any other, advanced Optimus machines. When opening or closing a game, the whole system freezes for a good 5 or 10 seconds while it switches between Optimus and DGPU only modes. That's an actively annoying feature, and was only a problem with the AI mode enabled. Leaving Optimus on its own, leaving it to its own devices, solves that problem. If you look past all the AI stuff, this is a pretty decent machine. It's priced in line with other machines like it, just shy of £2,000 as of writing, which while I wouldn't call it a bargain, also isn't exactly a rip-off either. I'd be pretty happy to have this as my gaming machine, with the AI stuff disabled, of course. With that said, those are my thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. What do you think of the Aorus 16X? Is this a machine for you, or would you go with something else? Is the AI stuff worth considering? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you do want to check it out, I will leave a link to it in the description if you're interested. You can also check out plenty of other videos in the end cards, and they pop up in a second, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already to be notified of new videos, kind of like this one. You can also check out osrtt.com if you want to pick up my open source response time tool or open source latency testing tool that I make right here at home and ship worldwide. But otherwise, yeah, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you on the next video.